So Samir, how's the early days of fatherhood treating you?
Amazing, surprisingly. From what I heard from a lot of other parents, it was very stressful. But I think we've been relatively lucky with the fact that Noor is she's pretty perfect in the sense that she's at the first 2 weeks she slept for 3 hours, 2 hours on and off. But after the first 2 or 3 weeks, she started sleeping 7 hours. So I'm feeling amazing, to be honest.
You're pretty lucky then, aren't you? From what I
Yeah.
hear, 7 8 hours early on is a godsend.
Everyone I've spoken to has said you are so lucky because everyone just assumes you're a zombie. I mean, I was a zombie for a couple of weeks, but I genuinely, I'm in such a good position because I'm functioning well, I can soak up every moment with her and be present because I'm not tired at all. So yeah, it's been amazing.
How's your life changed?
Yeah. So like I said before we started the recording, I had a massive purpose before this, but I didn't even know this level of purpose existed. I thought I was a relatively generous person, caring, thoughtful, but this has really unlocked a complete different level of that. It makes you look back and go, was I selfish? I wasn't selfish, but as an example, so because you're responsible for someone else, and you have. I was explaining to my mum the other day, actually, we have a professional need, social need, and personal need. And if you're not fulfilling one of those three, then you're not going to be your best version of yourself for your kid or your child. So right now, it's non-negotiable that I'm performing my best in all three of those. So it's helped me level up in loads of areas and created an even stronger why.
So how have your priorities shifted since Noah's come into the world?
So now there's always, I don't know about you, but let's use the physical as an example. When adherence to nutrition has always been a massive difficulty for me, but now there's not even because for me when I'm getting those feelings or I'm stressed or something where previously I would have reached for food, now it comes into my mind. I'm a role model to Noor, and I don't want her to have those behaviours because then that's going to allow her to live a fulfilling and virtuous life. So that's always in my mind, everything I'm doing now.
So it's like, they say like the physical is the vehicle. And now but we say the physical, not they say. We say the physical is the vehicle. For you, everything now, that vehicle is driven towards being a better father and being a better role model for your daughter.
But there is also there's a part of it that in order for me to be the best person for her, I have to be. It ties in, but she's the main driver. But I am prioritizing myself even more because I know that is going to allow me to be better for her.
Yeah.
It was funny actually. So me and Beth actually went out on our first dinner on Friday without her, and it made me realise that you need that time. But in order for everything kind of ties back to Noor. So we needed that time for us as a couple, so we can have the best relationship. So we can be the example to her. So yeah, I'm literally tying everything to her. So yeah. I've been brought up with family is king. That's from a young age. It's always been like that.
Why behind your why then? You've done the why behind your why exercise.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So we're talking about purpose. You mentioned how you had a strong purpose already, and then Noor came into your life and your purpose went to another level. What was your purpose before Noor? Like what was driving you then?
My purpose was still, I need to be the best person of myself so I can be the example to my family so we can live the most fulfilling and happy life. And then as a byproduct of that means I need to provide both financially, emotionally, all those side of things. So that was always my driver. And always I've just had this inkling in myself that I always have more. So that was part of that purpose, just to get more out of myself, challenge myself as a person, challenge my insecurities, challenge everything so I can consistently progress, because personally progress is where I find that fulfillment. And then if I'm finding that fulfillment, then I'm going to be able to be the best version. And that the only difference now is that because of Noor, that is reinforced. So my foundation is bulletproof. It's unbreakable. and yeah, that's the only thing I can say. The only difference is that it stayed the same, but now it's even stronger because there's no room for negotiation.
Where did your extremely strong foundation and purpose from for family come from? You mentioned the upbringing. Describe some of this and how it's shaped who you are now.
So my dad, he's Algerian. I don't know if you know any Algerians. They're very passionate people anyway, and they're very family orientated. But as a product of my dad's upbringing, where like he didn't have a dad and he came over to England, he was like homeless, so he didn't want us to experience any of that. So it was always pushed that I always knew that my dad would support me no matter what, so on and so forth. So a lot has came from my dad and my uncle, the role models in my life. And I always say, actually, because my mum's British and she's typical British, like as you would generalize. But so from both of them, I get best of both worlds. So typical British culture, you have that family orientated culture and you get that from the Algerian side of things. But from my mum's side, I gained a lot of empathy. From my dad's side, I learned how to set boundaries, and that ties in with helping be the example to your family.
That's really powerful. I mean, you mentioned setting boundaries and showing empathy. Almost sounds like the two of the keys of a coach, right?
Yeah, 100%.
This is almost like in your destiny to become a coach.
Yeah. I mean, my dad and uncle have always essentially been a mentor and a coach in some capacity, and they've demonstrated the 7 faces themselves. So I've always been surrounded by that process of that trial and error process of progress, really, and adapting to the situation at hand and applying what's needed at a given time. And I suppose that's coaching, isn't it?
Absolutely. How did you find yourself into fitness then? Because coaching can be applied in so many ways. Why did you choose fitness?
So I was your typical, I can't even remember how old I was. I was in year 7 or 8. I was your typical 5'0", chubby kid with boobs. And we used to do a 15-minute run at school, and I used to hold my t-shirt out so people couldn't see my boobs. And I remember doing that, and that was like the catalyst going, I need to do something about this. Yeah. And at the time, my brother was like, he was the kid at school who was in good shape. So he took me to the gym once, and I bench pressed a 20-kilo bar for like 2 reps. And then it went from there, basically. And then I just have a massive sense of curiosity. So I just dived into a rabbit hole. But yeah, that was the start of my journey, really.
You started at the age of 11?
Yeah.
Oh, wow, this is early, yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, training. So, and then obviously, I started that. I was just doing your typical training. Had no idea what I was doing. I wasn't your typical bro. I would always do back and quads. Like I'd only ever train back and quads. Hence why I've got terrible arms and chest. So I just remember doing dumbbell rows, leg press, and squats for years. Really inconsistent with my nutrition, which led me into genetically my family has strong legs, so I fell into Olympic lifting and powerlifting, that type of training. Okay. And then I was looking for a place to do it. Ended up finding a CrossFit gym. Started doing it in a CrossFit gym. Done a CrossFit workout. Ended up obviously doing CrossFit. Lived in France for a bit, and then came back. We opened a CrossFit gym, and because of my sense of curiosity, after a while, I realised it wasn't what I wanted to provide with people, because I couldn't provide an individualised service from a training and nutrition perspective. And then I went straight into personal training, and I really found my kind of passion for coaching people.
You kind of just fell into it then, almost.
100%, yeah. But I think along the way, the physical was a vehicle for me, because it introduced me, because I came from a Muslim family. I'm not Muslim anymore, but the philosophy of Islam and training, the philosophy of Islam was there. My dad kind of, he never really pushed it on me, but his philosophy was kind of instigated by religion, but it wasn't really religious driven in a sense, which also made me quite passionate about philosophy and just critical thinking and awareness. So that, and as a product of training, the physical challenge led me to thinking a little bit deeper. So they're kind of connected. So the physical was a vehicle for me.
Talk about that a bit more. So dive into that a bit more.
So
you mentioned the combination of physical and Islam, the philosophy of Islam. What was?
it wasn't necessarily the philosophy of Islam. It was the philosophy behind religion.
Okay.
That my dad, I remember my dad telling me stories or just giving me pep talks my whole life, which by principle had came from Islam. But because I was naturally a critical thinker, I always explored it. And because I didn't agree with like the boxes certain ideas were in, I wanted to explore that, but I wouldn't have done that if I wasn't, if the kind of philosophy I got from training, the physical challenge where you go, wait a second, I can actually challenge myself far beyond what I thought I could do physically. What can I do mentally? And that was the door for me. And then it's like it was like it was meant to be, because from 19 to my early 20s, I had quite severe depression. And it was the physical that kind of took me through that. And the philosophy that I learned which coexisted with that, is what carried me through it and allowed me to kind of, I would say I don't suffer with depression anymore, and I can manage it as a byproduct of training and philosophy together.
Would you mind sharing how the depression started? How you managed to pull yourself out of it, and some of the management you've had since? Because something a lot of our listeners will be either suffering from themselves or know of people who are. So any sort of insight would be amazing.
So my personal experience was, I was brought up obviously in a Muslim family, but I was brought up in England with an English mum. And you could apply my experience to any whatever like circle you're brought up in. So obviously I was quite conflicted inside. I was in England, I was brought up with English culture, but my blood is Algerian and so is my philosophy, but my blood and philosophy isn't Islam. So I was exposed to two different worlds. So I was constantly getting pulled and pushed in two different directions, which led to me kind of not being my true self. And when you're not acting on your true self, then obviously that has to come out sometime, because you know your truth, whatever that may be. And for me, it got to a point where I started actually addressing the fact that I wasn't, because I said I was Muslim, but I drank, you know what I mean? I done all sorts of things, and that was, I would say that's the thing that kind of pushed me over the edge and led to me. And then as some of the just cultural things impacted me in English society, because obviously like things to do with relationships, and I still have to fight those demons now. The insecurities that I gained from that culture. I'm with an English girl now, and I still experience things, but I can manage them. And for me, I see it's an opportunity to grow and have more deep and meaningful relationships. So without that, I wouldn't have got to this point. But the thing that really kind of helped me get out of it was just accepting the fact that I wasn't this person that I wanted to be for other people, and became the person used my dad's philosophy of set healthy boundaries with people, even if it was with those people who were closest to me. And as soon as I started doing that, I started to feel like I was respecting myself, and I got more respect from other people. Not that that was what I was driving for, but as a human, you want to be part of the group, especially when you're brought up with a family kind of atmosphere. So for me, it sounds kind of cliche, but it was just about accepting my true self, setting my healthy boundaries. And there's no negotiating when you want to be the person you want to be. So it's quite hard, especially when you've got like social norms that you have to go outside of to become that new person. Like Samir 2.0 was that person that went, I'm not Muslim, I'm this person. If you don't like it, sorry, you're not in my life. But yeah, it's like I said, it's something I still fight, I battle with now. But now it's more of a vehicle for me to progress and be a better person, because I don't want Noor to have those insecurities. Do you know what I mean? And I don't want to project mine onto other people. So yeah. I suppose that's it. I've spoken about that for a while.
How did you pull out? What were you feeling in the midst of it, and how did you pull yourself out of it? Because you've kind of touched on it from the overview perspective, how you got to 2.0, but what was the work involved to get to 2.0?
So the work involved was when I was working in London, actually, the gym we used to work at. The transition was me going back to that tiny box room and admittedly crying myself to sleep, because it was physical pain and it was completely hopeless. That's the only way I can experience. And then I remember when I was working there, I began to I've always set like social boundaries, which to my detriment at some points has kind of been a bit too much because I swung too far on the pendulum. I could have come across aggressive. But it was when I was in London, I began to set boundaries socially, which was the catalyst for me to set boundaries within my like closest circle, so within my family. And then I said, all right, I'm just going to challenge myself to do this more with my dad, with my mum, with my nan, all these people. And then slowly, as I began to set those boundaries, you realize that the problem is a lot bigger in your head than it is in reality. But I don't think, maybe this might help someone, but I don't think, I think by principle, because if you ever seen a therapist, if you've seen a therapist before, if you read about it, if you watch lectures, whatever it is, they're always talking about these concepts, but it's in the application that I think you have to find out yourself and figure it out. But obviously, if you are experiencing those things and you're listening to this, go and get help straight away, because I didn't for ages and I wish I did.
How old were you when you went through this? So diagnosed 19, but I look back and probably since I was 15. Do you know what I mean? So as soon as it's a lot more prevalent now, so it's less of a taboo. Although as a man, you still get that kind of imposter syndrome, but you just got to challenge it. But I think it's a lot less taboo now. So people are actually reaching out for help. There's a lot more out there and stuff like that. But yeah, like it was a matter of, it was a process. Yeah. If you don't mind me asking, what was your cry for help?
What thing triggered that reaching for help?
Yeah, because I'm assuming you were suffering in silence for a long time, and then something. I'm assuming by help, do you mean professional help, or do you mean just reaching out to someone as a friend, or
reach out to anyone? But I always don't sit in silence. Speak to someone, but seek professional help. That's the first thing anyone should do, even if it's never. No one's ever going to judge you, because it's so challenging. Because it can be, because one of the triggers for me was I started thinking, wait a sec, this would be easier if I wasn't alive. That was the trigger for me. So, yeah, and then I stood back from that and I looked and went, oh, wait a second, this is something I'm considering. This isn't something I ever thought that I would experience. My name's Samir. That in Arabic, that means happy. And it's funny because people, those kind of people tend to be the people that suffer with it. Not that it's a front or anything, but anyone can suffer, anyone can experience it. And kind of ruling it out, would be pretty dangerous. If, for example, if I actually acted on that, well, you never know. And looking back, there was times where I nearly did. So, but now I'm in complete control of my emotions. 5 years later.
What did you do? What was your first? You said your first cry for help was that internally. How did you reach out then? With my family. So I spoke to my mum. Spoke to her because I didn't want to tell my mum because I didn't want to hurt her. But she was a person that I felt would understand me, because she was so empathetic. Whereas my dad, not that I thought he would empathise with me, he's so callous from what he's been through. He's one of the toughest people. He might be 5'3", but he's the toughest person I know. But I spoke to my mum, and then I ended up seeing a therapist. I actually saw a hypnotherapist. I had CBT, then I saw a hypnotherapist, and I resonated most with this specific therapist, hypnotherapist, and that's where I feel I made most of my progress. But that was just personal preference. But it's a constant challenge. Like now, it's when I'm not depressed, but I have those thoughts, but I manage them. When did you start seeing things turn around and things you started seeing a light at the end of the tunnel? When I was 20, I can't remember, because there's a period of time that I kind of blocked out. I was in a past relationship, and I remember one day waking up and going, this isn't right for me. And that was the day, but I can't remember when. Probably when I was about 24, maybe 25. So it's linked to your relationship?
Partially, yeah, I didn't even mention that, but partially, yeah. And I feel, now I look back, that was probably me rebelling against the religious side, because she was the polar opposite of what a Muslim family would want you to be with.
Yeah. How much does this all come from? Has there been an identity crisis? You found it being an identity crisis, or?
I don't know, because I've always been Samir. There's never been a time when but it's just I wasn't educated enough. I wasn't aware enough. I wasn't mature enough. I suppose it's those experiences that have made me the man I am today. The man that, like, when Noor was born, there was no doubt in my mind that I was going to be the best dad. Like, there's no doubt ever. And I think without all those experiences, I wouldn't have been able to do that. So I've always been Samir. It's just been kind of progressing. Yeah.
One of the things we spoke about just before we got air is you said, I said, is there anything you want to explore? And you said something you've been writing about a lot is challenging your personal demons and the connection to the physical journey. Do you want to share more about what you were talking about there and what you mean by this?
Yeah, so this was actually sparked by one of my clients. I'm not going to mention their name. But yeah, they really inspired me to kind of explore this, because it's something I explore anyway, but just brought it to the front of my mind. And it goes back to what I was saying a minute ago, how that physical challenge where it's painful, it's physically painful. And if you can handle, you're voluntarily exposing yourself to physical discomfort, sorry. And essentially that just puts your foot in the door to prove to yourself that you're capable of pushing the limits. And that, constantly doing that for me on a weekly basis in the gym, is just a complete reflection of the fact that I'm capable of doing that internally. And this is what I mean by exploring those demons and stuff inside. And because we all get to that point where we go, oh, wait a second, am I actually cut out to challenge this? Am I actually going to be able to minimize the negative effect of this insecurity demon, whatever it is, in my life? And that physical, whether it's, for example, I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as well. And that's one of the big reasons I do that, is because someone's trying to choke you, someone's trying to break your arm, someone's trying to snap your wrist, whatever it is. It's those physical changes. If you can handle that and prove it, it's just a matter of proving to yourself that you're capable of doing something. So it allows you to avoid that self-rationalization when you're exploring what's going on in yourself. And you get those thoughts in, oh, maybe I don't need to challenge this. Maybe I can put it away. But it just prevents that for me, exploring those physical progressions, it prevents that from happening. And then, because if it did happen, 5 years' time, it's going to crop up and it's going to explode. But yeah, the physical connection for me is a huge thing. That's why I train so hard. I haven't got the best genetics, but you won't work harder than me, period. And that isn't ego. That's a matter of challenging my inner demons, because they're pretty big, just as all of ours are. So yeah, that's what I mean when I was talking about those connections.
What goes through your mind when you train hard?
When I'm going into the set, I'm literally thinking about how I feel when I let go of my insecurities and demons, because I look back and personally I've come so far. I was so uptight. But now, that feeling of not being uptight about things that I can't control, it's amazing, and you generally feel free. You feel liberated. Do you know what? Actually, I wrote something the other day on my notes, and this was talking about a relationship, and this is a big value for me, because I know my demons would affect my relationships, and because they're such a big thing for me. I actually wrote this. The value of a legitimate functioning relationship is demonstrated in the pursuit to challenge those demons and not project them. And
that's interesting.
That's something that drives me with training, but also the internal fire drives my training, because I know I like feeling physically strong and looking good.
What do you mean by it fuels your traiing? Do you mean that the demons fuel your training, or that you can't project them after? What does that mean?
So if taking control of those inner issues, that allows me to have that feeling, being able to control those, not to the sense that you're just shoving them away, but you're actually kind of dissecting them, breaking them down, and letting go of them. That feeling of being able to do that is liberating. The day I realised I wasn't Muslim was so liberating. I lost like 50 mental kilos. So that's what I mean in the connection from the internal to the physical training.
Okay. So you're using it almost as a way to process any sort of problems that you may be sort of feeling at any one moment.
Exactly, yeah.
And what are you mentioned that you're battling demons, you're battling insecurities. What are the biggest demons in your head right now that you still struggle with all these years later?
So coming from a Muslim family, for me, it was a matter of, this is how a relationship is, in the sense that you don't talk about your past. You don't kind of address those things, because there wouldn't have been a past in Muslim countries. Do you see what I mean? So it's dealing with that different culture. And although I've been brought up in England and I myself have a past, challenging that is still, to this day, probably my biggest difficulty. Although I'm in a position where it doesn't pull me down. I don't want that. Like, yeah, because it's going to allow me to have better relationships. I've got really good relationships, but I can make them better by letting go of my own insecurities. So yeah, they're probably my biggest ones, and just being enough for my family.
What does enough mean?
In the sense that I can provide them with the support emotionally, financially, and just educating Noor, and not to the sense that this is where you do things. Teaching her to critically think, so when she's older, she can make her own decisions. And like for Beth, making her know that I'm always there, going to love her fiercely, support her no matter what, provide for her. Although she's her own independent woman, she respects the fact that that's something I want to do as part of. It's not about being a man. It's just what I value. I value supporting my family. That's what, and enough for me, myself personally, because I have such high standards. So it's a matter, like for myself, it's a matter of holding myself to a higher standard by physically challenging those demons, progressing in my career, educating myself outside of that. Yeah, that's what enough means for me. Money, yes, it gives you options and stuff like that. But for me, it's about my family structure, them feeling supported, loved, and it all comes back to it's family is my foundation.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I'd love to be able to give back to my mum and dad what they gave to me, not financially, but the actual lessons. So if I can be the example, then they'll be proud. So
that's amazing. Amazing how you've kept that value so strong in front of mind, no matter where you are in your career, in your personal life, and different stages in your life as well. So it shows just how much of a value. Well, it's your purpose, right? Like you said, it's your life's purpose. I listen to you, and I think you're the embodiment of physical is the vehicle. You share that common belief that this journey is far more than just the physical aesthetic byproduct that you gain. It's so much more. It channels everything. It gives you an opportunity as an outlet to use as an outlet, gives you an opportunity to process, explore. But it's not an easy journey, is it? It's not an easy one, right? And I think it always shocks people just how hard it is. How do you create the connection for let's say for people listening to this who are on the journey at different stages of the journey? How do you create the connection so that you can lean into the challenge as opposed to run away from it as soon as it gets difficult? Because it's so easy to, whether you've got a coach or whether you're just listening on your own or whatever it is, accountability is difficult, right? Accountability to this journey. And the first thing many of us want to do is we knee jerk and we run away from accountability. How do we lean into this? How do we embrace the challenge and gain all the vehicle benefits that you've been speaking so passionately about for the last half an hour?
I don't know. No. Action. One, you need to embrace the fact that there's going to be challenge. And as an adult who's probably paying a mortgage, buying food, working, you might not be happy in your job. Like, you're doing all these things, so you're capable of facing the challenge of controlling what food you put in your mouth. But obviously that's just a small aspect of it. But we actually spoke about in the team meeting recently about how we were having a discussion whether or not you can start the journey and be brought in, like understand what is required of you to experience the internal benefits alongside the physical. And I think you need to have experienced the level of difficulty within the journey in order to unlock the door. It's a level that you can unlock, or a revelation that you have at some point. But definitely you have to embrace the fact that this is going to be challenging, because it's those challenges that give you the tools to grow, or the keys to unlock your next level. And you have a responsibility. If you're a parent, if you're an individual, if you've got a partner, you have a responsibility to be a good person. Not saying that being shredded makes you a good person. It doesn't. But that constant voluntary exposure to difficulty is what is going to make you grow, and as a byproduct, be a better person, whether that's for yourself, which is absolutely fine, or for the people around you. And I think accepting those home truths, it can be quite challenging. And being someone personally that had a fear of accountability in the past, it's been those kind of accepting those things that allowed me to move forward.
So it almost came from a space of acceptance before you could, acceptance of yourself before accountability, or acceptance of the challenge?
Acceptance of the challenge.
Yeah.
Awareness that you're going to have to pull those weaker parts of yourself. When I say weaker, the things that force you to self-rationalize. Yeah.
It comes back to that introspection plus action.
100%.
Because I think when I look at, you said something really good, is that being shredded doesn't make you a good person. And I'm glad you said that, because we know a lot of people who are in great shape, but they haven't really got the benefits of physical being a vehicle. They've just done a lot of action and a lot of physical training. I think you need to have that combination. And part of the combination of introspection plus action is first introspecting, but within that, something you've spoken about a lot in this conversation, but just generally before, is the idea of self-awareness and being a critical thinker for yourself. Can you expand on those two topics and why those two things are there's such gaping holes in the majority? I think I was speaking to Ivan yesterday, and he said to me, he can't believe how few people critically think. And no matter how smart, quote unquote, smart they may be, or again, quote unquote, financially successful in their career, being able to actually critically think is so rare. But what is critical thinking, and why is it so rare?
The ability to not take something as face value and figure out the working components of something, I would say. And for me, I would say, because I suppose critical thinking is about forming beliefs and understanding of things. I think a belief, if you don't have a belief if you haven't challenged the opposing side. What you have is a dogma. So there's no real understanding of how it actually works.
Okay.
So and from are we talking about an industry perspective or from like a client perspective?
Let's do both. Let's do both.
So from a client perspective, I think it's a lot of people come on board, or just in general, want a magic pill, or they're like a moth to light. It's that they're looking for the answer, but the answer isn't easy. And I think that's what kind of instigates that lack of critical thinking, because it's, as a human, you want to take the path of least resistance. So for me to say, yeah, look, you just eat, like hit your meal plan or nail your nutrition for 3 days a week and do whatever the hell you want the rest of the week, sounds easy, doesn't it? Sounds nice. Whereas if I say, look, you're going to have to do this for like 4 or 5 months, and when you go to social events, you're going to have to strategize and make smart decisions. It's not sexy, and it doesn't appeal to that part of people. Some people might not be ready to accept that. That's just where they are in their journey. But if you get someone that comes on who's ready to critically think and is self-aware, that person, they will slip up, but they're going to take on board the feedback their coach gives them, or they're going to take on board the feedback the experience gives them, and allow them to kind of introspect and see what specific trigger led them to doing that, or what specific behavior that isn't going to be feasible to their lifestyle solution. Yeah.
That's critical thinking, right?
Yeah, well, I suppose it ties into self-awareness as well.
Yeah. I was going to say, it sounds like both are involved there.
Yeah, but from like a self-awareness perspective, I suppose that allows you to see your faults, see your strengths and leverage them, see your faults and leverage them to your benefit, both of them to your benefit.
Yeah, and how can you cultivate this? How do you create higher levels of both of them?
Obviously, like experiences, but as like a kind of immediately actionable thing, journaling, exploring your thoughts, exploring your reactions, exploring your feelings. Even if that's just opening up a journal, saying this thought has been on my mind for the past week. Why am I feeling like this? What I do sometimes, if I have a thought in my head, I literally just write it down and I put an arrow underneath it and I try and why am I feeling like this? And then I say, like why behind your why exercise. I do exactly that, but for my thoughts, feelings, emotions, reactions, and then tie it into, have I got control over this? If it's a yes, then I'm going to do something about it. And if it's a no, then I'm not going to let it affect. I'm going to work to not let it affect me.
Interesting. And then it's just a repeat try and error process in real life when it happens, and then you reflect and then try and act on it again, right?
Yeah.
Interesting. And then that's from a client perspective. What about the industry? And you got some passionate thoughts here.
In the end, like we said recently, there's a lot of people in the industry who are shredded, and then they're kind of they're marketing from a monetary side of things, but that doesn't kind of instigate critical thinking. For example, if it's a specific diet name or something like that, or they're selling the fact that they're shredded and they're not providing any real value to the people that are kind of forking out their hard-earned money for. And I think there's a massive aspect of ego that's driving that side of things, because it becomes less about the client, less about an industry that actually helps the world be healthier, so on and so forth, and more about maybe fulfilling someone's narcissistic tendencies, which completely takes away from why am I doing this? How can I help this individual, not this group of people? And filled with quick fixes. That's a concept. So I can get shredded in 12 weeks. What happens after that? That's just one concept. It doesn't explore anything else that's going to facilitate people's growth in the long term. And I think there's a lot of things driven by ego in the industry. There is a lot of good stuff. It's very saturated, but there is a lot of good stuff. But I think because a lot of people there's a lot more education now, and people are a lot more interested in learning more about training, biomechanics, nutrition and stuff like that. But the coaching side of things, there's not much out there that it gives everyone the tools to be a good coach. And that ties back to, for me, the baseline of a good coach is someone that can critically think and is self-aware, as it's the precursor to empathy. And being able to critically think is going to allow you to apply the given tool to the client at hand for what they need at that given time.
Which is what empathy is.
Yeah.
What's your vision for the fitness industry? What would be the ideal fitness industry?
An industry that focuses on creating a higher standard, facilitates people to create their own lifestyle solution, so they can actually work towards their why and their purpose. Not an industry that's driven by surface level, excuse my French, bullshit. So basically, join RNT.
Yeah, pretty much, So, can you expand on the lifestyle solution to purpose? Because that's one thing we spoke about a couple of episodes ago with Nathan, and I was talking about the concept of staying in shape for a greater purpose. You have to have that greater purpose to fuel why you stay in shape. How do people make that switch? Because people come for they always starts with the physical, and then it evolves into something so much more. When do you make that? When do you, like you said, unlock the door for the next layer, which is purpose and the relationships you have? How do you unlock that level of purpose into the journey of this physical journey? Because I personally think that without that greater purpose, your chances of staying in shape are minimal.
Yeah, no, I agree with that as well. it's a grey area. There's no specific point that I can give. But I suppose you have to embrace the journey. Like, it's going to come. It's going to come if you keep challenging yourself both physically and mentally. There is going to be a point where you've acquired all the physical and mental tools that allow you to address and dig deeper into yourself. I think that's a valid way of doing it.
Yeah, and then you start understanding more and more.
Yeah, exactly. Because for me, I've always had purpose, but I only really kind of grasped it fully and got like real clarity on it a couple of years ago. But I've been training since I was like 11 or 12.
You know, with the physical training, you know, we talked about unleashing the demons. One thing I want to discuss here is people who are going for a lifestyle solution where they just want to learn how to stay in shape. Often training can fall to the wayside, or training isn't always the priority. It's more just staying in shape. But we know that taking yourself into that sort of dark place, I call it the void, which I took from Dave Tate, who calls it the void, and I think no one else has described it better than that. It's when you're just locked under the bar or whatever you're doing, and everything just goes blank. For me, that's the drug of training. Like I need that on a regular basis to feel normal. And I believe everyone should experience that, because, like you said, that the ability to challenge your demons in that space of void is indescribable or uncomparable. But it's such a difficult place to go to, outside of time and miles of just doing it. How do you cultivate that level of intensity or mindset to get into that place, to take yourself there? Because I think there's a lot of people that are potentially missing out on that training aspect, which is where so many of because the byproduct is you're going to look really good because you're training so hard that you're going to get the benefits. But there's a mental aspect here.
I don't know. I wish I could just go, yeah, it's this, because then that's something I focus on with my clients, because I really want them to experience that. It's actually funny. You know, I said it, the client who inspired me about their kind of demons and training, he trained like an animal. So anecdotally for me, and he's not the only example of that, but anecdotally, it's those people that can kind of go to the void who get amazing results and find their purpose. So maybe that physical, getting them to that physical point, getting them to challenge that could be the key to kind of unlocking the door to all those other areas.
Yeah. It's one of those things that I get asked it all the time, and I see people train sometimes, and I'm like, oh, you just don't know what you're missing. Like you're kind of there, but your mind's checked out like 10 reps before your physical has. Like you've got so much more to come. But it's almost like you can't really teach that overnight, is it? It's something you've just got to be, as a client or as a person, you've just got to go there, right? Over and over again.
Because I've thought about this a lot, and I'm like, are there people who are just cut out to do that, and are there people who aren't? And sometimes I'm like, I kind of believe that there are people who aren't cut out for it, but you expose them once, maybe, or maybe just that we. It's a weird one.
Is it exactly that? Is it exposure? Like, is it a case of you can't take yourself there unless you go with someone who's been there before and needs to guide you there?
Yeah. Because I can't remember. When was the first time I felt? I mean, I can't remember a time where I didn't do that in training.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I've worked when I worked out with some friends who, you know, in the past, and you know, I watched them train. I'm like, dude, you're just not going anywhere near it. Like, let's do. It's always easy to do on like a leg press or a hack squat, right? They're like the two easiest ones to show people on this.
Yeah.
And I said, guys, just do this. Like, forget your workout today. Let's just do one set and just go as many as you can. And then suddenly it's like, oh, that's the new barometer.
Yeah. So maybe it's exposing people to that, the first benchmark.
Yeah.
But how do you do that? Yeah, it's something I'm always thinking about when I'm talking about training with clients.
Because I want people to feel that anxiety before they go into the gym. You know, the good anxiety, like not the disruptive, but the good the good type of anxiety of like, oh shit, I'm going to do this in my training today, because that's when you know you're onto something.
Yeah. I don't know, but I definitely think there is something around that 100%. And from tying that to like, for example, martial arts like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that feeling, because being, you know, when you're doing a hack squat and I done hack squats today, and I've just got a new program, so I was just testing the waters, and I was meant to do like 15 reps. I got to 15 reps and I was like, I've got more. So I ended up doing 22. But you know, when you're doing that last rep and you hold like not even a quarter of the way up just to make sure you're empty. But that physical discomfort is such a, like, I don't know, maybe I'm a bit masochistic.
Yeah.
And then this is why I love jiu-jitsu, because in jiu-jitsu, it's kind of similar, but you're gassed out and you've got someone on top of you trying to choke you. Like, that's like those two things combined. You got to try Brazilian jiu-jitsu, man.
I've heard good things. Yeah, I've heard it's mainly grappling, right?
Yeah, and it's like it's a really, not that you're going to go out and have a fight, but the confidence that comes with it is, yeah, it's really good. Maybe we'll just do a collective RNT jiu-jitsu session.
Sort my shoulder out first. Blame the old shoulder, right?
Yeah.
So what's next for your journey? Right now, I think you're preparing for a photo shoot. Is your next checkpoint? How's the photo shoot prep going? You got new baby.
Yeah, I mean,
it's routine all over the place. What are you doing to kind of keep yourself on track? I
mean, having the shoot, the idea was massive accountability to keep me on track during this like adaptive period. It's quite a big. I'm adapting. Like, there's big changes, like huge changes, both from my relationship, work, training, and training is that anchor to my day that allows me to have a level of control, because obviously I've shifted my work scheduling from doing it for the whole week to doing it in the morning, because my day is going to be different because of Noor. But in terms of actually doing the photo shoot prep, like managing my nutrition, my training, my steps, for me, it's been a really good, not eye-opener, just a reminder that you can always find time. I'm doing 17,500 steps, and I'm training 4 days a week. I'm looking after Noor a lot of the time. I'm doing housework. I'm doing all these things, but I've managed to find time to do those things. So it's been a big reminder that I'm capable of handling that. But having the shoot is really kind of just driving me to be an example, because the behaviours you demonstrate along the way and build along the way, the challenges you kind of beat along the way, are very admirable, and they can have a big impact on other areas of your life. So it's all about kind of using the purpose and the physical as a vehicle to leverage this time in my life to really kind of fast track myself into Samir 3.0.
3.0, love it. You said to me on a voice note, you said you've delayed your shoot because you want to be in the process for a longer period of time. I don't think I've heard that before. Is that just for that exact reason, that you just want to keep with the period of life you're in? You just want to extend this?
Yeah, because
the accountability to it.
Yeah, exactly that. And I'm relatively. I'd say I'm about 6-8 weeks out from being about shredded. About 10 weeks out from being shoot ready. So, but not that I'm slowing anything down, but it is about staying in that process, especially coming up to the festive period, because there's no way I'm going to be letting go of the hard work that I put in just because it's a festive period. Because I can't remember the date of the shoot. It's 29th of November, which is going to see me consolidate through December. And in the past, that's been something I struggle with. So I thought, it's going to be a challenge, but having the accountability of doing the shoot then and consolidating through December into New Year is going to be huge. So that's the rationale behind it.
Yeah. What have been some of your consolidation experiences in the past, or lack of consolidation?
I've structured it previously. Like, okay, I correct my calories up, but it wasn't formalized like this in consolidation. These are the shifts in behavior we're going to do, the shift in mindset. I've only ever consolidated successfully once, and that was last year. But before that, I would rebound like a madman every time, like put on 10 kilos in a month. And then I was like back to square one. And then it saw me in a kind of perpetual cycle of dieting. But now earlier this year, I done, it was like an 8-week diet, I think. And the last 4 weeks I was on 1,100 calories, and I consolidated really successfully. but more so the structures, the habits and routines, because I knew I was having a baby. I wanted to have those things in place. But in a sense, and to be more malleable with those 3 S's and habits, because obviously it has to be malleable right now. Yeah, but that's an overview, really.
Yeah. With the nutrition, you touched on it earlier. You've always struggled with nutrition. Adherence has been your issue. Like, has that been linked to some of the experiences you've had mentally, or has it been a form of crutch, or what has been the sort of?
Food was always a coping mechanism, and in the Arabic culture, Algerian culture, we celebrate with food, we mourn with food. When we're bored, we have food. There is that. For example, I have a perfect example. When I know my uncle's coming over, I'm going to see him. The first thing that comes into my head is feast. But that's that nostalgia of being a child and celebrating. So it's taken some time to disassociate from that connection there. And it's not about the food. Yes, the food is part of it, but I don't need to eat till I'm like over full to enjoy the company I'm with. So there was definitely so there was like a cultural aspect that led me to have those behaviors. And then as a product of that, when I was in my like lowest, it was a coping mechanism. There was 1 week, and I'm a bit of a clean freak. So there was 1 week where I got to the end of the week, and at the side of my room, there was 7 pots of Ben and Jerry's. And I didn't even remember eating them. So I had a pot every night for a week, on top of whatever else I was going nuts with. So, and when I really started controlling my adherence, managing it better, creating a real framework that carried me, it was recognizing the fact that, okay, these behaviors and associations to food took me 20 years to create. It's not going to take me 12 weeks to get rid of. So it was a matter of accepting that and just kind of focus on the small wins from a relationship with food perspective. That's always been huge for me. But I'm at a point where I would say I'm in complete control.
What were some of the steps to get into control? Is it completely linked to the journey or gone?
I think, well, for me, it was a matter of at one point I was like, I wasn't lean. I'm only 5'7", and I was 83 kilos, not because of muscle. So a big chunky one. And at that point, I felt like I had no control. So I said, all right, I'm just going to bump my food up to maintenance so I can work on that relationship with food. Maybe it wasn't the best idea at the time, I don't know, but I held my body weight, but I didn't binge and I didn't reach for food when I was emotional. So I think being in a physiological kind of homeostasis, equilibrium, whatever you want to call it, my hunger signaling wasn't massively off. I was actually getting satiated. I was prioritizing my meal hygiene. I was prioritizing my sleep and looking after myself, not prioritizing fat loss, just focusing on building that relationship. It took some time, and I wasn't lean when I wanted to be lean, but as a product of that, I'm now going to be able to stay in the shape of my life.
If you were listening, maybe some final words here. What's some advice you'd give to them if they're struggling with their relationship with food? They're in a dark place. What would you say to them?
Don't punish yourself when you overeat. Recognize it. So, recognize why you're doing it at that time, because it's just I suppose that sparks that level of self-awareness around food instead of just mindlessly gorging it. I mean, I'm not a specialist, but definitely having a greater level of self-awareness would be huge. I think it's Carl Jung. There's a quote. It's like, until you make the subconscious conscious, it will control your life and you'll call it fate. So simply by creating a precursor to self-awareness, that's a foot in the door to progress.
What's a precursor to self-awareness?
In this case, recognizing why you're eating that food.
Okay. Yeah. So asking the questions of yourself.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thanks for being very candid here with Samir. I really appreciate diving deep and understanding more about your journey and some of the challenges that you've been through. Obviously come out of it the other side in a really good place, and looking forward to seeing what Samir 3.0 brings.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Amazing. Thanks for coming on.
Cheers, mate.